The problem is the business still looks at software as a cost on top of the person. They don't look at it as a tool for that individual. You would never have a company hire a carpenter and give them a handsaw and say, go to work. And they say, well, this is going to be so much more work. And then them say, well, that's what we hired you for. They would be like, this is ridiculous. I'm going somewhere else. You would give them now a battery powered skill saw and whatever state of the art tool they need, because they fully believe that the cost is there because it makes them more efficient. The amount of times I've heard on calls with executives, that's why I hired a safety professional to do this work. Why do they need this tool? That's what I was saying at the beginning. The industry's mindset, we say we're innovative. If you're still doing paper, you're not innovative, because there's no excuse for that. There's no, some of my trade workers in the field, they don't have phones. Or some of our sub-trades, well, what are they going to do if their workers won't download a mobile app? Yeah, by the way, there's software like Salus out there that solves for all of that stuff, but also you're still driving for perfection. What if 90% of your forms come in digital and 10% still come in paper? Are you better off? Have you created a better environment? Is there now a conduit between the office and the field through technology that didn't exist before? Yes. Let's make progress, right? Give your safety teams the tools they need to do their job well. And safety teams, stop looking for perfection. Make progress. Right? Perfection doesn't exist, and it stops you in your tracks from moving forward.
I've done a little research on you, Gabe, but excited to talk about Salus and safety, and did kind of go back in some of what you've been out about publicly lately and want to make sure ChatGPT got some of this right. But did you start the company without a laptop? I got to know.
Yes, that is true. Field level worker at heart, came from the field, didn't own a laptop when I started Salus. I had a desktop computer that I used once a month for like a few hours to write invoices, but outside of that, didn't have anything. Our tech stack, when I was running the window installation company, we had emails and text messages. That's what we used. So we were tech savvy, just not software tech savvy, because it wasn't solving any problems for us.
One of the biggest things I'm excited to talk about is this kind of built by builders movement. You're alluding to it there, but starting in the industry and building a tech company, talk about like that philosophy.
Built by builders?
Yeah.
The group that I'm a part of, there's actually a group called Built by Builders. Did you know that?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So there's a few of us that have gotten together to create this Built by Builders. And I think the mindset is there's a lot of, and don't get me wrong, I think tech companies, construction, software and construction contact needs both. You need that disruption because the people coming from the industry, we're in a box, whether we like it or not. We grew up in the box and we're trying to break the box, but we might not even know where the limits of the box are. So you need that disruption. And sometimes, well, at least at Salus, what we like to do is create that disruption internally, where we hire probably 80% of our staff is from outside the industry to help us think differently. But I think the translation between the two worlds is still very hard. Trying to translate the industry to software developers or people from outside the industry, there's so many misses that happen in that process where you end up with the right mindset. Okay, let's disrupt. We got to come into this industry that's a little bit more behind the times, and we can introduce what's existing in other industries to this industry, and we should be able to just create such change. Construction is complex and beautiful in its own way. And until you actually understand that way and meet the industry, and not just the industry, but companies and individual personas where they are, and understand why they're there, doing what they're doing the way that they're doing it, it will just break. It doesn't work. And especially for what we're doing. We're dealing with a lot of construction tech is in the office, right? 90% of the software is for the office, right? Pre-construction, office staff. But 84% of the workforce is in the field. And we're tackling that. And so now our software is interacting with laborers in construction, trade workers in construction. And that's a whole nother ball of wax, right? Paper is our biggest competitor because paper in so many ways is so easy to use. in so many ways it's very difficult to use, very difficult to access. We all know the downsides of paper, but software and paper is still like that's still the biggest battle today, right? In the field of construction. Can you make software as easy to use as paper? Right?
Yeah,
Sounds ridiculous.
there's no clicks involved in using a pen and paper, and that is what it's all about, is minimizing clicks, right?
But there's no profile creation needed. We still have to support iPhone 6 at Salus because not as many anymore, but they're still out there. We still see them submitting forms in our system. We're doing whatever they're doing with safety in our system on an iPhone 6, more in iPhone 7, 8, but definitely not up to date with the latest iPhones. And then let's talk about software updates.
Yeah.
It's
You bring up profile creation. That's a funny one to me. We don't need to get into it, but I just think about logins and how often I hear colleagues complaining about, oh, they put this 2-factor authentication thing on something and now I don't know my password and I've got to change it every month. And security comes with a downside for sure. And it's just ease of access and stuff. But I wanted to get more into, you were mentioning building a safety tool for the worker. And I just think this is a concept we need to embrace if we're talking about safety at construction. Like, it's about protecting the worker, right? And a lot of times it seems to be more about protecting the company. Did you go about trying to fix that?
Yeah, I think if you think about safety historically, like I grew up in construction labor at 18, worked my way up to being a partner in a business that I was running. And when I started, safety was very different. Safety was just hard hat, steel toe boots, get the job done. And the first thing you thought of when you would do that work at a worker level or a task specific level was, how do I do this, complete this task faster and better than the person next to me, right? And it's not that we didn't want to work safe, it's just that we didn't understand what working safe was. We thought it was protective equipment. We didn't understand what the word complacency even was, right? And so that evolved in the right way, at least for the first step towards the right direction, in the sense of, I remember specifically, we sent crews to work on a job site, one of the larger general contractors in Canada, and they said, you can't come on site without a safety program. And we were like, okay, we got one of those. Here you go. And they're like, well, this safety program, it's got 7 other trade company logos on it, and it's not yours. And I was like, yeah, but that's what we've had for the last 5 years. Like, have you even opened it? I'm like, well, we just give it to you guys. That's what it's for, isn't it? They're like, no, you got to make one that replicates and describes your workflows and what you need to do to work safe. And it's like, oh, okay, so we brought in a safety consultant. And then they're like, and you have to prove you're following it. I was like, I don't even know what that means. And we had like 100 employees. And so then we had to prove that we were following the safety program, which meant that we had to shift from this, I don't know, personal protective PPE based mindset to compliance based mindset. And the shell shock was incredible. We had to get 55-year-old window installers to fill out paperwork that they haven't done in like 10 or 15 years, right? Why would they have to fill out any paperwork? And so that was not fun, right? And then through that process, I started to learn a lot more about safety, the repercussions of not being safe, the mindset around safety, around how the forms and documents are not just to protect the business. They're actually supposed to be there to break up complacency. They're designed to make you stop and think. And in an idealistic view, that makes sense. But the reality of it is you're introducing this academic process into a world that doesn't learn through academic process. I barely graduated high school, right? I don't learn through that. Doesn't mean we're not intelligent in the field of construction. We're some of the smartest people in the world and we're doers. But you break down and shut down when you see these things. And the other side of it is the field today, even today, this is like 10 years ago, I'd say that was introduced in my world in construction. Today, the field level worker still doesn't view that form as something that breaks up complacency. They complete that form on behalf of the company. They think it's to protect the company. And it's just a matter of whether those trade workers in the field have bought into the fact that I'm okay doing this for the company or not.
Right.
Right. And so, yes, the pendulum has shifted from safety professionals. Mind you, 10 years ago, there was like a quarter of them in comparison to how many are out there today. We're out in the field mentoring, but their mindset was also there. They knew first aid, right? They were there to make sure if you got broken, I can make sure I can fix you, or at least get you somewhere where you could get fixed. And some mentorship in the field where it's like, hey, don't do that. Cop, also very cop-like, right? Like disciplinary. To now it's shifted to a world where the compliance side is better than it was, right? I will still say that is more safe than it was when I started, but it has 100% shifted to protecting the business over the worker. And a lot of that is because now safety professionals are so fearful of the repercussions of if this is missing, if that is missing, if this box isn't checked, if that box isn't checked, what's going to happen to me as an individual, or what could happen to the business? And it's moving away from, is this actually working?
Right.
Is this the form actually breaking up complacency and making the worker safer? And that goes all the way, I'm not going to get into it right now, but it goes down to the value exchange between the worker and safety is broken. And so now we have all these processes around that to make up for it, right? Could you imagine if you told a carpenter, hey, carpenter, use this hammer every day at 8 a.m. And oh, by the way, use this skill saw on Friday at 10. You'd be like, well, that carpenter doesn't know what they're doing if you have to tell them when to use their hammer every day. So then if you take that mindset and overlay it into safety, that's exactly what we're doing with safety. Fill out this form at this time and this form at that time. And because they don't intuitively interact with it like they would with any other tool, we have all these other processes and paperwork in place to protect ourselves from the fact that we just haven't created this intuitive collaboration between safety and the trade worker. Anyways,
do you know how to fix that problem yet? Are you working on it still?
That's what we're obsessed about. Yes, here's the reality is that things are not black or white, they're gray, right? We have to protect the business still. But the perfect situation is you intuitively create this interaction with the trade worker where they have operationalized safety and they use it like any other tool. And the outcome of that is documentation and protection of the company. The problem is companies are so lost in this administrative burden that you have to solve that burden first. And a lot of this is not, it's not like, let's eliminate all paperwork and all process around health and safety. That doesn't work either. And so you have to move the two together. And I think safety powered by software does that. I think that's the conduit that you can start to create this value exchange, where you can start to create a mindset where a worker starts reaching for their phone like any other tool, right? They're reaching for that software. They don't look at safety as this barrier, right, to work anymore. They look at it as, hey, I want to understand how to do this task properly. I haven't done it in 6 months. I'm a 22-year-old worker. I don't want to go ask my foreman again for the 10th time how to do something. I have this incredible tool that can interactively show me and answer any of my questions. And oh, by the way, I'm looking at this chemical. I have no idea what it is. Well, I can just scan that QR code or easily find it and understand what I'm exposed to. Or hey, every time I interact with this product, it builds my profile and my work experience to empower me. Or sometimes it's not even as complex as that. Sometimes it's just the way in which we pull the workforce around an initiative. Are we just going from the top down saying, hey, this is the safety stuff you have to do, this is the software you have to use, and then there's an immediate barrier? Or you're saying, hey, we're a business, this is what we're trying to achieve as a business. We truly believe that not only does safety make us safer, but it actually makes us more efficient, less rework, and gives us a competitive advantage. The more you interact with this, the more we can prove that our business, our company is better than the next, and we're going to win. And then they understand that every interaction they do powers the business, and that can be a value exchange. And so our view is not from the top down. We started from the ground up. We start with a trade worker focused software and didn't care about the office at the start because we didn't want to sacrifice that ease of use, and then started working our way up, right? And we started with small businesses, then small and medium businesses, and then medium, and now we're moving into the enterprise world. And I can tell you right now, the big ENR 100 companies are part of the problem, because what you just described at the beginning, all this IT requirement, all this multi-factor authentication, the process around, I need notifications, I need hierarchies, I need all of these things done in the software. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, you can do all that. The complexity is going to go through the roof and the ease of use for the field is going to be gone.
Hmm.
And so how do you balance this? Do you really need multi-factor authentication for a trade worker to fill out a form, right?
It's a good
So
question. Do you think a lot back to your time in the field? Is that like part of your motivation as you're building this stuff?
I think I try to, but I mean, the reality is I was 15 years in construction, and now I'm 7 years in software. And so I constantly find myself being removed and have to re-anchor myself. And I don't find myself on site as much as I should be. And so it becomes difficult. But we have 250,000 workers that have profiles in our system using it. So the data is there. It's almost like we're building a B2C product in a B2B product, right? In order for us to be the market leader in construction safety tech, we have to build a product for the trade worker, the safety professional, and the business. And they're not the same. They're completely separate. The go-to-market strategy is almost completely separate, but has to be obviously intertwined for focus. It's that's this what I mean by, if you're not from the industry, it gets complicated
Yeah. Do
understanding
you,
this, because it's not like selling software to other software companies.
right. Do you think, as you're building that tech, I just keep thinking about trying to make it easy for the user, the worker in this case. Do you try to make it fun? Like, what are some hacks to getting people to want to use this? Or is it about educational? Like, can we make you more powerful?
Yeah,
Which way do you go?
I think right now that the reality is that the things we're solving right now aren't sexy. Where we want to go is maybe a little sexier, but still, like, can you make safety more fun? I'm not sure. I think what we want, where we're going with our product, is aligning more to the human safety training. For example, is broken. It's like a 3-hour course that nobody retains, and then you go 2 more years without actually revisiting that, and then by the time that happens, you've forgotten almost all of it, except for the instinctual stuff you do. But yet you look at a smartphone and everyone's interacting with social media in 15-second intervals and absorbing an incredible amount of information, whether it's real or not, they're absorbing it. And so let's not try and reinvent the wheel. This is how human beings learn, and how we've always learned is through microlearning. So how do you embed that, and then also embed that process into relative things? You can't train a drywaller on something that an electrician is going to do on a high rise when they work in wood frame construction and never been on a high rise, right? But they could, so you want to teach them about it. It's like, no, they're just not going to retain it. And so how do you make sure that before, in the day-to-day operation, because where incidents happen is in the moment. All the stuff that we're doing today, we're kind of at a stagnant standstill for the most part for companies that are really cutting edge. They're still not, we're still having deaths, significant incidents, and still things happen in the field where people get hurt. And a lot of that is because unless it connects to the worker right before they're going to do their task, it doesn't actually work, right? So how do we create this more performance-based safety, which a lot of people are moving more towards? Build the foundation for enforcement, but don't just like point the finger and say you did all this wrong. An investigation is an opportunity to learn. And then from that, how do you ensure that that doesn't happen through this constant communication of breaking up complacency in a different way, through micro learning or through little bits and pieces of the form that you have to do, but being a part of their day-to-day work, which is complicated. But the non-sexy stuff that's really making an impact is, how do you make sure creating a profile is very easy? How do you
Mm-hmm.
make sure that because they don't have an email address or they have a phone number from another country, that they can still create a profile in your system within literally 3 seconds? Like 5 seconds, you got to be able to have a profile in the system. And by the way, how do you make it so that they don't have to remember their password, and that they can log in every time without having to even enter a password, but still keep the data secure, right? And that's really where the complexity comes in that we're solving for right now. How, offline and offline, and an offline mode in a product. It might sound simple, like, oh yeah, you can do it offline, you can do it online. Some of the most complex stuff we've done in our product is around that, because it's not as simple as just offline and online. You have to be able to have multiple people working on one form together and allow them to go online and offline. They also have to go seamlessly from a desktop computer to a mobile app without saving or exiting, and be able to work in the same continuous flow, just like a piece of paper. I can take it from my office to the field, go into the parkade, have multiple people sign off on it, and still have that paper without having all these people have to have barriers to get in there. How do you create that seamless flow on a digital product? That's where it's not sexy, but that's where the coolest stuff happens.
Totally. As you're building this stuff too, what was like, what are some of the other big hurdles? I kind of also just want you to talk about Salus. Like maybe some of my audience have never even heard of the product. Maybe just before we get into more, describe it. What are you guys doing now? What does it look like?
Yeah, so we set out to we believe that safety is a standalone product. It's not a plug anymore. It's a platform that's going to stand as beside finance, project management. Safety is complex, and it's even more complex when you don't have the tools to solve for that complexity, and safety Salus solves for that complexity. We solely focus on health and safety and everything that it touches it, whether it be asset management, forms, documents, certificate, anything. And then we're hyper focused on the field because the data is in the dirt. And if you don't solve for that ease of use to power the administrators, it's all just smoke and mirrors, right? That you can have the fanciest report in the world, but if what's it pulling from, right? And then on top of that, or what we built that on top of, was this architecture that I think this is really what is unique about us, because we didn't know what we were doing at the beginning. I was from construction. My co-founder knew how to build software really well. And we didn't know anything about SaaS. I didn't know what the word SaaS was. I didn't know about scaling software companies and all this go-to-market stuff to get thousands of companies into our system. But I knew what the industry needed. And so when Robbie came to me and asked me about how we built the architecture, he didn't ask me like that. He asked me simple questions that built the architecture. But our architecture is truly different. We just replicated exactly how construction works. So there's a lot of software out there that didn't do that. They just said, okay, we're working with a company. The company can create all the stuff that they need to do in this system, and great, just like other software. But in construction, it's not that simple. All these companies work together in this hive of communication in real life on one job site, but across multiple within a geolocation. So you might have a sub that works for 10 different GCs, but also works for the same GC on 10 different sites. And by the way, you might have workers that work for 10 different companies within 2 years across all these different sites. And so if you don't understand that flow, software just gets broken.
Mm.
Because when you take a general contractor pushing software to the sub, and then a sub wants to sign up and use that software, if that's not connected in the architecture, it's just broken. The data can't share seamlessly, or it takes a lot of work to connect the data. And then on a worker level, they should be able to just have their own profile and go from whatever company they want without having to figure out another login, figure out another password, right? And so when you create that architecture, it just, in a geolocation, when you actually see it start to work, it just creates this really cool hive of communication that happens automatically. But then for the trade worker in the field, all they have to do is go on a site, scan a QR code, or fill out a form. No login, right? You don't have to log in. It just does all this stuff.
How are you guys using like tech hardware, sensors, drones, wearables to make this more valuable?
So we're not in the hardware space. The hardware space would plug into our platform. So if you're using any of those sensors, video, cameras, anything else, they plug into our API. Even within safety, it's a good point. Like, we can't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
We're a Series A startup, 55 employees. We got to focus in on what we can do best, but working with a lot of those different companies that do that stuff.
How does can drones and wearables, can they prevent accidents? Is that something that's in the future, or is it?
I mean, I think that those end up in kind of a similar spot to PPE. I think that, sure, a video camera, if it sees a trend that's coming together, can it prevent an incident by flagging it and pinging someone to let them know? in an idealistic world, maybe yes, that can happen. But as long as you have human beings on a job site performing work, which I believe is going to be a very long time before that gets replaced, you will have human nature involved. You will have complacency. You will have workers carrying what they're carrying with them to work from home, which is something we haven't talked about, a whole nother issue around mental health and mental fitness. And you will have these issues that are happening. And also, perfection isn't the solution. Perfection is the enemy of progress, but also can create, the reality is job sites are higher risk. And sometimes you have these things that point out all of these issues, but what do you do with all of them? Right? We don't have the solution to, yeah, you walk on a job site, there's a lot of risk out there. Is the tool just pointing out all the risk? What's the solution? The solution is a lot of the times that risk might not be preventable, right? The worker has to be trained to understand how to work within that, around, in and around that risk, and put controls in place themselves to prevent that risk.
Yeah.
You can't just remove risk altogether. It's impossible. And we keep moving away from, like, well, it's this is what I'm talking about at the beginning. The value exchange between the worker and safety. If that's not there, which it isn't for the most part, we put all of these other things in place to protect the worker. And it just creates more systems, more process, more software, more technology, because that value exchange isn't there.
It just reminds me of how what you were saying makes me think the thing I've been thinking a lot lately, which is like when you put a safety vest on, you kind of feel a little bit more safer and you act different on a site. This is the simple version of it, but I think I just wonder, it seems like a catch-22 because we need to point everything out. We need to make the job site safer. But as we're doing that, we also just need to educate people. Your danger is up to you. Like, you need to
Yeah.
protect
You're
yourself.
responsible
And
for your own safety. Accountability is what's also being removed here,
hmm,
right?
and
It's
I
our
yeah,
job to provide a safe work environment, but it's their job to own that and work safe, because we can't do it if we look at them as just machinery that we're trying to put in a perfect situation.
yeah, it's like caring about the people is what actually seems to matter the most. I'm a big believer in tech too. I'm glad you guys are using a software solution to try to help this safety problem, but I'm also like, I like that you just seem to be investing in the worker. Do you think that goes somewhere further eventually? Do you have plans to kind of get into the just emotional side of it?
I don't know if the emotional side of it is like maybe too, I don't know if that's what creates the value exchange. I think there is an emotional connection. Human beings only do what we believe we are going to get something out of, whether we like it or not. There has to be that
Mm,
connection there. But I think that here's the reality is the industry is behind the times across the board, even still in the office. The way that we look at software, the way that we look at innovation is still behind the times. For the most part, we're too busy to actually make change and take on that risk and spend the money on the job site level to actually innovate. Even if you talk to the most innovative GCs out there, they're going to say the traditional buildings that we build have less innovation than actually going out and doing like solar or modular, right? Because it's so fragmented. You have subs, you have architects, you have owners, you have GCs, you have all this stuff, and nobody's really willing to sacrifice the margins to really truly innovate. So there's that aspect of it, that we have to find a way to get past this I'm too busy to change. But it's still all focused in the office, and 84% of is in the field, and the data is in the dirt. And if we can actually get trade workers to intuitively interact with software where they really see that value exchange, and I believe that that conduit is through safety, you change the industry. Imagine a trade worker coming from high school where they've downloaded an app, they get their training, they go and can get connected to any company they want to because they can see and understand what those companies do. They start working for those companies, they build up their knowledge locker through this interaction of all the things that I'm doing on this job site for this company through my career. It makes them more powerful every time they interact with software. It builds up their profile, right? if you can get that buy-in from the trade worker where they feel like they're getting something out of the interaction with software and safety, the data that starts coming out of the field is something we've never seen before, right? Everyone's about data now for AI. The most of the data is not recorded. It's not even unstructured. It's just not being recorded because it's paper-based or non-existent in the field.
Can you get into some like tangible ROI, some cost savings or incident reductions that you've seen Salus be responsible for?
Yeah, I think there's so many different locations that works. I mean, there's the hard cost of if you're doing safety today, depending on no matter what size company you are, there's hard costs around paper, around getting paper out, around all of that stuff that happens around it, around the time it takes to do paper, around the time it takes to walk down a flight of stairs to get to your job box to find your safety manual or whatever it may be to access that information, which I think for the most part as an industry we're starting to move past, but it's still the amount of paper that is out there is insane. So there's that hard cost. The other aspect of it is the efficiency gains in the field by enabling and empowering these workers to have a device that has access to the information they need in the field where they can actually learn and do less rework, and the time it takes for them to actually get from zero to productivity is that much faster, and make sure that they're doing it the right way. That's another aspect. Insurance premiums. We've had companies saving millions of dollars in insurance. The reality is that people just don't it's insurance, workers comp, all this stuff is viewed as a cost of doing business now, and it shouldn't be. We have to look at why insurance premiums are so high and then say, well, why is that? It's proven that a properly run health and safety program will drastically lower your workers comp and insurance. But so many companies still don't run a safety program. Yes, the bigger companies do, but a lot of them don't do it, right? And that's just hurting the entire industry. And so how do we make that where it's easy to start understanding and following better safety? So it shouldn't be such a burden on companies and workers to take that next step. And so I think that's one of the biggest areas for cost savings really is the insurance side. Companies like Bespoke Metrics have really started to tackle that on the pre-qualification finance side. And how can we marry up to that with safety? Safety at the business level, finance and safety are the biggest risks that companies have to manage on job sites. But people
Yeah.
really haven't solved the safety side yet. It's still kind of scary and unknown and not really bought into. Is it working?
Part of that may never go away in construction. I mean, yeah, like you said, I agree that humans are going to be doing construction physically for a long time. No matter what robots become capable of, I think you'll still have humans in the field, and it's a dangerous thing we do. Construction is dangerous. You just can't eliminate all danger. I think that might be true across the board, but especially in construction. So I wanted to get into too, though, how maybe AI and machine learning can help us. Are you guys into that, and how do you see it
Yeah,
developing?
yeah, we're into that. And I'll just make one comment on the construction is dangerous. Construction, it's all risk exposure is different no matter what job you do. If you're in an office, the risk exposure is lower than if you're in a construction site with ever-changing work environment. But I think the key here is it's not perfection. You won't create a perfect environment where everyone is safe, but progress matters. We have to constantly be progressing, because if we are not, 100 years ago, there was an acceptable death toll on a building, right? And if we just take that approach of, well, construction's dangerous, that still would exist today. But we have to keep making progress, because we work with thousands of companies. Not a single one of them has a perfect safety program. But the best ones are progressing and constantly changing the way they think about it. And so AI absolutely in safety has the ability to create a big impact. The problem with AI is you can get lost in the smoke and mirrors. You get lost in what it will do versus what it can do right now. And so
Mm-hmm.
our approach to AI is first, we owe it to the industry to solve big problems with practical solutions. One of the biggest issues in construction today, especially around health and safety, is communication, language. And so how do we create even the simplest thing? It doesn't sound sexy, but being able to provide a digital form in whatever language, and then whoever is reviewing it and reading it be able to switch that language back to their native language. It's like, oh, well, that sounds like that should be something AI can just do. Well, AI can't just do that very easily yet. Constantly working on, we have tools already in our suite that are solving for that, but I can't just flip a switch and think, oh, AI is just going to solve that. It doesn't, right? And you would think like, oh, well, AI, look at all the stuff it can, it can't do something like that. And other things around just, for example, the information that is out there around health and safety in your geographical location or around OSHA or WorkSafe or whatever country you're in is available on the internet. But it's a lot of it is generic if you're going to talk to ChatGPT. The real information you need is hidden behind PDFs, right? Actual safety data sheets or documentation on tools or machinery or regulations from OSHA. You can
Mm-hmm.
get the theoretical from ChatGPT. So we actually have a team of people, we call them ninjas, that are going through the internet downloading thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of documents to train our safety tool on, so that it doesn't just create a safety program for you or a safe work procedure or a form or a document for you, which it's good at, trained on safety specific general information. It actually starts citing the stuff that are hidden in these PDFs all over the internet that can now be accessible at the safety professional's fingertips on a job site, or in the future, a worker's fingertips on a job site when they scan like an SDS or a tool or a chemical, and it can automatically pull
Hmm.
the risk forward to them in an interactive way. I could go on and on about all the stuff that we can do with AI, but essentially we have agents that are designed for each segment of safety, whether it's a safety professional, whether it's the business, which is the executive side, or the field level worker side. We're building these agents out to be able to basically be their safety assistants. And we call it Salus IQ. And all these things fit underneath.
It's awesome. I'm
We
excited
actually made
about
it
that.
public. So one of our tools is just public. Anyone can use it.
I'll
Safety
check it
professionals
out.
just use it. Yeah.
I'm going to name a few other emerging technologies and feel free to ignore or talk about any of them. But AR, VR training, autonomous equipment, blockchain for compliance, any of these things on your radar?
Yeah, I think all of those are great. I think that the training, especially well, autonomous machinery is good. I don't know how good it's going to be in a construction site. Still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, because it's not all these. It's like in a manufacturing facility, these machinery, these AI powered machines are great because it's an assembly line. It's the same thing over and over again. It's the same route every single day. On a construction site, a forklift or a bobcat doesn't take the same route every single
Mm-hmm.
day, right? It's not that simple. Maybe when you get into high rise construction on a floor plan, you can have some things that are automated. I'm not sure. But the augmented reality of wearing these either for training, where you actually put yourself in the environment that you could potentially be in and train yourself on that before you even set foot on a job site, especially for new and young workers, I think is incredible. I think the costs and the accessibility to that stuff needs to get better, because it's, again, now it's the most sophisticated companies that have access to that. So when you have a 50-person work company on site, do they actually have access to that training? And they're like, a construction site isn't one company, it's 40, 50 companies working together. And by the way, 80% of the industry is companies that are under 25 workers, right? These companies that don't have access to any of that stuff. So in order to make the industry safer, we have to make it more accessible for those companies. And then, yeah, the augmented reality around, like you're talking like those Ray-Ban glasses and stuff like that, where you can actually, I think that's interesting. The question is, what are you doing with that? If it's to point out hazards constantly, are you just creating complacency and noise in the worker's visual field that's just actually making it more dangerous? If it's an easier way to access information, potentially, like, again, it has to be anchored in empowering and creating that accountability for that worker. The worker has to buy into it, And then all of these tools become great, right? But if you're just putting it in front of them and then creating noise, I don't think it ends up working. So we have to figure out what's the value exchange for the worker in those glasses. A lot of the stuff that we innovate on and these conversations we have at conferences or whatever it may be, it's in an echo chamber. I was at a workforce conference a few months ago. It was an incredible conference. There wasn't a single trade worker there, and we're trying to figure out how to get more trade workers into the industry, right? So
That's funny. I think you might have already done this or Salus did or something, but I want to get people who are in the field every day on my podcast to tell stories. It's a hard thing to find, to be honest, but I also want really compelling people. So I'm a little bit picky, but yeah, I think talking to the people that are actually doing this job is necessary. I think I probably have two types of audiences. A project manager on a construction project, basically been around construction my whole career. But I think there's a lot of people like me who are like, I want to make sure the projects I'm working on are safe. How would you advise them to advocate for technology as a solution, maybe to pick up Salus and bring them to our job site? How do we educate the industry and get this stuff implemented?
yeah, I think the biggest issue there is there's so many blockers to buying software today in construction businesses. You got to jump. If we just needed the buy-in from safety professionals, our tool would be almost in every company in North America. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is the business still looks at software as a cost on top of the person. They don't look at it as a tool for that individual. You would never have a company hire a carpenter and give them a handsaw and say, go to work. And they say, well, this is going to be so much more work. And then them say, well, that's what we hired you for. They would be like, this is ridiculous. I'm going somewhere else. You would give them now a battery powered skill saw and whatever state of the art tool they need because they fully believe that the cost is there because it makes them more efficient. The amount of times I've heard on calls with executives, that's why I hired a safety professional to do this work. Why do they need this tool? That's what I was saying at the beginning. The industry's mindset, we say we're innovative. If you are still doing paper, you're not innovative
Mm-hmm.
because there's no excuse for that. There's no, oh, well, some of my trade workers in the field, they don't have phones. Or some of our sub trades, well, what are they going to do if their workers won't download a mobile app? Yeah, by the way, there's software like Salus out there that solves for all of that stuff, but also you're still driving for perfection. What if 90% of your forms come in digital and 10% still come in paper? Are you better off? Have you created a better environment? Is there now a conduit between the office and the field through technology that didn't exist before?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, let's make progress, right? Give your safety teams the tools they need to do their job well. And safety teams, stop looking for perfection. Make progress, right?
It's beautiful.
Perfection doesn't exist and it stops you in your tracks from moving forward.
I think that might be life advice too.
Yes.
The other bigger audience that I have as well is probably people who are just interested in construction technology, or maybe they want to start a con-tech company. Do you have advice? I just know for myself, even PMs, I think a lot of us, we go to school, learn a lot about how we can make construction projects better, and then we go do it. And I've spent coming up on almost 20 years in this industry now, and just always felt like there's got to be a better way and constantly looking for it. Is it about that? Is it just if you think technology is going to solve a big problem, focus on the hard stuff and try to solve it with tech? What really inspired you?
What inspired me was a few different things. We were running a paper process. We were that company that I said was not innovative, but mind you, we didn't really care about being innovative. We wouldn't have said we were an innovative company as far as software goes. But the pain got so big that we had an incident that happened where somebody dropped a steel L angle 10 feet long from the 14th floor of a building. And I remember the foreman called me as he was running down the stairs. I still remember it like it was yesterday. He couldn't see it land, so he thought he killed someone,
Mm,
right? So he's running down the stairs thinking he's going to go, and it was into a Whole Foods parking lot. So he doesn't know if he's killed, who he killed, right? Can you imagine that feeling? And so he didn't kill anyone, but there's an investigation, there's holes in our safety program. I got personally written up and I was running the company and the business was at risk. All this stuff happened. And that catalyst made me, just like other failures that I've had in my career in construction, like you elevate yourself from those failures. Well, there's two types of people in the world. There's the type of people that point fingers and say it's not my accountability and my problem and I'm doomed to repeat it. It's just a matter of time. And there's other people that say, no, I have to grow and learn from these things, and they're forced to grow and learn. And that's who we were as a business. But we couldn't get past paper. We're like, we will always be reactive. We will never really know what's happening in the field. We will never really have a conduit for our team to learn through this. And so for me, it was like, there's no other way. I have to solve this problem and I have to find a software. But there was no software out there that really understood the industry and how to and would actually solve a problem for our trade workers. It was going to add more problems because software built in the wrong way can add just as much problem as it's solving, right?
Amen.
Constantly happens. And so the biggest thing is make sure that you are solving a problem for one, right? And you're constantly making, because Salus didn't become what it is today, and it won't be what it is tomorrow because of what we're doing right now. It's continuous improvement, right? It's constantly getting the crap beat out of you and learning and continuously improving towards the direction of what actually provides value and what matters. And along the way, you're constantly going to get distracted by what other people might think is valuable or what even your team or what you get distracted by. And all of a sudden you're going to end up in a place where you're like, hold on a second, what are we actually doing? What are we solving for
Mm.
anymore? And you have to constantly break the box and the mold that you're in and reset and keep moving forward and keep battling and keep doing. And I think there's two things that are problems and incredibly inspirational. As startup founders or people that are wanting to solve problems, you constantly look at the people that have already what you believe to has made it. And you're like, well, they did this, they did all this stuff. Look how fast they did it. Look at what they did. I'm going to do it like that. And you set the bar so high based on something that is not you, maybe not even in your industry or what you're solving for. And you think you got to do it like that. And then you match that with investors that might hold you accountable in the right way, but also set the standard to that. And all of a sudden you're in this world of hurt that you think you're failing, but yet you just set like it's your story, your narrative, right? What you're going to do for success is not going to be what Steve Jobs did for success,
Mm.
right? It is going to be very different than anyone you know, right? My success is going to be a different story than Bespoke Metrics or Trunk Tools or Document Crunch or any of these people that I know well. They're incredible people that I actually look up to and aspire to be like, but our story is going to be very different. So I'm not going to go do what Sarah is doing or what Mike is doing at Bespokes exactly how they're doing it because I have to write my own narrative. And so you're going to get discouraged along the way because it's hard, but don't. Hire the people around you that can elevate you and keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep anchoring it and solving problems. When you get down, go talk to a customer that's loving your product, right? And get re-inspired on what you're doing.
Even more life advice. I mean, I just think about comparison is the thief of joy. And it's true in my little personal career. If I'm just thinking about the people I'm working around and comparing my trajectory to theirs, I lose out, honestly, on just enjoying the work I have in front of me. And there is something to enjoy. And I'll speak to everybody out there. I don't care how meaningless your job seems. You can find joy in it if you look hard enough. It can be hard to do. You mentioned that at the end about building the people around you. I bet that's important in a tech startup or any startup. How do you choose people? How do you keep them motivated on the same goal you have?
Yeah, it's a good question. I found myself constantly reinventing myself as I move through life as a worker to a lead hand to a foreman to a supervisor to running a company, constantly having to reinvent myself. And what it is actually just the people. I don't do much, to be honest. It's all about hiring the people around you to allow you to get to your business because it's not me. It's Salus is in the middle to get the business to the next level. I would still be at Tross Construction, the window installation company, doing what I was doing if it wasn't for Robbie, my co-founder. Right? And it's not just a technical co-founder, him specifically. I wouldn't have been able to start this company without him because of his personality and our specific relationship and the timing where I was ready to move on from what I was doing because I was in a partnership role in that business with that founder of that company. I was ready to kind of move on and things happened at the perfect time. And then from there, after Robbie, I actually hired my brother because I didn't know anything about, I was not tech savvy at all. He was more tech savvy. So he could actually help train companies and work on the customer success side to now who we've hired our management team and senior leadership team that our CRO has 35 years of experience in construction tech, taking companies from 5 million to 40 million in revenue. Like that's what she does. At Autodesk, at OpenSpace, she's incredible. To our head of product, to our growth lead, head of marketing, growth leader. Like all of these things that have to come together, and how you attract them is you have to sell them through obviously the right people will be attracted to you if you're honest and authentic with them, right?
Yeah.
I can't be anyone but myself. And anytime I try and lie to myself and the people around me of what I think I need to be, it fails. You bring in the wrong person for your business, or it just fails. It's just a matter of time.
One of the ways I've seen that happen too, sorry to interrupt you, but is
No, you have
if
to.
you're too money driven. I've just seen people who you start talking to them about something they're building and it just kind of becomes clear over time. They just want to make a lot of money. They're not really trying to sell. I can tell just from the hour we've been together that you're not one of these people, but I mean, and maybe that can be taught too, but talk about why you can't be money focused. I hope you agree with me.
Yeah, I agree, but also I think that there's a hard truth behind that. And that's why I think a lot of construction tech companies struggle is that you can't do this for the most part. By the most part, I mean like 99% of companies can't do this without money, right? You can't do it without investment unless you have a very high net worth. Maybe today with AI, you can start doing some of this stuff without it, but then your competitive moats around your product are almost non-existent. And so and in the reality of it is we are creating a business where you do need to make money and create success through that. And so you have to balance that world. Our investors are absolutely incredible. Prudence, Outsiders Fund, Mistral, Industry Ventures. Prudence was one of the companies that led our seed round and reinvested in our Series A and co-led essentially their Series A with Outsiders. And they have been we wouldn't be here without them, to be honest, because without us being able to raise a Series A, I don't think we would have been able to do what we needed to do to build the team and the product to where it is today to get to this next level. It's like looking at sports leagues. If you're familiar with soccer in Europe, or any other league, you play at different levels, and then as you move up in these different levels, the team or the product or what you had that worked and was successful at that level is no longer successful at the next level. And you go through these stages so fast, you need these people around you that have done it before to help you not pay the dumb tax. And our investors, we wouldn't have been able to raise as successful as a Series A as we did. We got multiple term sheets in 2022 when it was one of the hardest times to raise capital. And just going through the hardest times where we needed investors to help us through those both mentally and get into the dirt with us and understand what we need to do as a business. It's incredible. So, and in order to make all of those investors successful as well, because you're not just serving an industry now, you're serving investors. You want to make sure that they get a return on investment. And by the way, a return on investment isn't just a monetary return on investment for your investors. If you can give that, you're giving a return on investment to the industry because it means you're successful at solving their problems. Now, where people get lost is all I care about is a return on it's making money. I started this company just to make money. I have no plans on having this survive. Even if you stop working there, making sure that your brand legacy survives and continues to grow and solves the problem you set out to solve. If it's not anchored in that, well, that's why most software companies out there after 10 years don't exist, and they've been sold 7 times, right? And then the value that they're providing is diminished, and the person that owns that end product is solely looking for a return on investment and doesn't care about anything they do in between. They'll cut support, they'll cut success, they'll change the product, they'll fire customers, it doesn't even matter, because all they look at that as a return on investment. That's just money for them now. And
It's
that's
been
where
awesome.
that balance gets crazy, right?
Really enjoyed this, Gabe. Do you want to point people or leave anybody with something else? Is there somewhere you want people to look for you?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on LinkedIn. We're constantly also putting out um, stuff through Salus on LinkedIn, social media. Try out our AI tool at ai.salussafety.io. It's free for anyone to use. There's incredible value there. And the biggest thing is just keep making progress towards change. Stop looking at perfection and all these blockers and just start doing. And that's the only way we're going to move the industry forward.
I love it. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for your time, man. It was a great conversation.